Well, welcome people to this breakout session at ARAT, and we are waiting for a few more people to come on, but I think we'll get started because people can move back into that. Coalitions have been a big part of our life. My name's Fuzz Kitto. For those of you who don't know, I'm National Co-Director of Stop the Traffic.
Be Slavery Free.
Be Slavery Free. Oh my goodness, it was that. And my good friend, colleague, etc., is Carolyn. Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Kitto, and along with Fuzz, I'm the National Director of Be Slavery Free.
We've worked in coalitions for most of our life and a wide variety. So Carolyn, what's some of the coalitions that we've been involved with?
So we've been involved in some international coalitions that have involved hundreds of organisations. We've been involved in neighbourhood coalitions, which have been about doing things for the benefit of our neighbourhood. We've been involved in multi-sector coalitions, focused coalitions, whole ranges of sizes and formalities.
And we've been involved in faith-based coalitions nationally, internationally, local and regional, interfaith, and also in particular sectors. Been in the anti-trafficking area. We build partnerships and coalitions between businesses. We develop coalitions and forums, which is almost like a short-term coalition sometimes with governments. And we also have had a chance to work in a number of coalitions which have been justice or specific based. For instance, the Uyghur, what's it called now?
Enforced Labour Coalition.
Yeah. And the Child Labour Coalition, we're involved in Voice, which is a coalition of NGOs working in the chocolate industry, and their key thing is putting out reports and working how they lobby together. So most of our lives have been working in coalitions. So what is a coalition, and what's the benefit of coalition? Well, these three little clips give kind of a visual on that. I collect adverts. Weird, I know, but I just love the art of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on market research and then taking a message and put it in a 30 to 60 second slot. So I've worked in radio and I've worked in television as well. And that art of cutting it down and visualizing it, I just love. Hey, here is three little clips which talk something about the benefits of a coalition.
It's smarter to travel in groups.
I love that. And it just shows that working in groups really does give us capacities when we work together for the outcomes that we are trying to hold. And so there are many types of coalitions and collaborations. Carol.
So we just want to go through some of the kinds of collaborations and coalitions that exist. Funder collaboratives are about groups coming together to pool their resources to potentially achieve something larger than what they could fund on their own. I've worked in a couple of public-private partnerships where the government has things that they want to achieve, but they don't have the funds to do it. We live in Sydney. Sydney is covered with tunnels, and they have all been developed as part of public-private partnerships where the government has put some parts of it in, private enterprises put other parts of it in, and together they've been able to achieve something. And the positive for the government is it gets its infrastructure built. The positive for the private sector is they get to charge for people to use that infrastructure for a period of time. There can be multi-stakeholder initiatives where there's voluntary shared activities, some things that people choose to do together. There are social sector networks. So we've used these quite a lot around particular issues where the people who are working in that area wouldn't naturally meet with each other. So, for example, we find that working on forced marriage, for example, there's a whole range of people, from the people that register marriage celebrants to people, religious leaders who are working on who are doing marriage, to migration agents, to lawyers, to various ethnic communities where this may be a practice. And so those groups of people wouldn't naturally come together, but they can be brought together for information sharing and for taking short-term action.
We're involved in bringing in the Modern Slavery Act into Australia, and we've been lobbying since 2011. I think we sent 90,000 postcards from activists through to the federal government in Australia, and then Twiggy, as we call him, Andrew Forrest, and apparently if you give a few $1 million to a political party, they tend to listen a bit more. And so he said, we really need one of these. So they said, the federal government said, well, let's have an inquiry into it then. It was, in a sense, a collaboration. Now, we are a coalition as Be Slavery Free. We're about 30 organisations, NGOs, faith-based groups. We have unions. We have freedom businesses. We have ethical businesses. And we have international development organisations. So we really need to work. We found that we really need to work together. We can achieve so much more. When the Modern Slavery Act was going through the UK, I was up there doing some other work and went along to two of the NGO meetings. And the government had said to the NGOs, if you come with a common voice, even if it's your 3 to 5 most important things to have in a Modern Slavery Act, the chances are you're going to probably get all or most of them in. I attended the NGO meetings. It was one of the saddest experiences of my life in NGO world. They could not work together. They could not lobby together. They could not share their key concerns together. So I came to Australia and I said to Carolyn, if we ever get to have a Modern Slavery Act in Australia, we will be getting the NGOs together. We will be working really, really hard, but not just the NGOs. We're going to also develop coalitions with businesses and coalitions with politicians and with other organizations that really think that this is a way to actually make a difference. And it was because of that when we came and we represented in the different memberships and the sphere of influence that those members had, something like probably close to 5% of the Australian population. When we went with that sort of coalition, the politicians listened to us. Once they listened to us, then we had to really have a common voice and the key things that we'd worked out together to do that. And after a lot of very hard work, basically 2 years full time in trying to build this collaboration together, in building this coalition together, in working on this with the government and with business, the miracle happened, and we got it through. Didn't get everything we wanted, but we've got it through to a point where now it is so talked about in the business world and in the media, because we came with that solidified voice together. So there are 4 stages of developing a coalition.
So the first is, why do we need a coalition? And we'll talk a little bit later on about what is it that a coalition can do that individual organisations can't do, and vice versa. So coalitions are not the solution to everything, but they are the solution for a lot of things. What are we coming together, and what are the outcomes that we are looking for, and what's the structure that we need to achieve that? People have a lot of meetings, they're very busy, they get a lot of emails. If you're not clear about the what of your coalition, people will lose interest.
How is really, really important, because it's how you bring it about. How do we get people together into a coalition? How do we strategize to be able to achieve the outcomes? How do we communicate? And communication in a coalition is one of the most important things. And how do we make decisions together becomes key elements of an effective coalition. When? Well, when is a really important one, because it is about timing. Our hero is William Wilberforce and the Clapham sect, and they were a coalition. They came together, merchants, artists, clergy, and they worked out that the win was really important. It took them so many years. They realized they could not all bring it in at once, and so they took it step by step by step. What is amazing with them is that they learned to read the times and when to do what. Not only did they help bring into England the empire laws as such, it never actually was fully come into English law until 2010, when they were tidying up a whole lot of loose ends. But they not only worked out that it is about stopping slavery, they worked out it's about building a good society. So they also started the RSPCA, the Royal Society, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They built the Portrait Gallery in Trafalgar Square in London. They also brought in a whole lot of
British and Foreign Bible Society.
British and Foreign Bible Society. They were very strongly evangelical Christians, and but they also realised that there had to be models, and showing people what could work and it can work was really important to be able to create the when time to do things. And so they started Sierra Leone. It was actually the first British colony as such. And they bought slaves that had been freed, and they were able to help to be freed in both Canada and the United States. And they took them to Sierra Leone to show that economically slaves had capacity and potential to be able to become an economically independent and supported society as a colony. It was a model. Once they had done that and showed that could be happen, people started to realize it's what I commonly call the seeing is believing method of when people can see that it can happen because it is, then they're ready for the when to be able to bring in the strategies and what is happening to be able to do that. So,
next slide.
If you've got questions.
So questions you can put in the chat at the bottom. We will monitor that. But also we are in a meeting, so that means if you take yourself off mute, and if there is a question you want to ask at this point,
or you want a dialogue about it,
so far, or you want a dialogue, then please do that. We'll stop a few times to allow you to do the questions.
One of the most important things to work out in a coalition is that to know the things that we can do better together that we can't do alone. but also to work out there are some things we can do better in our separate organisations, and there are some things we can do better together as a coalition. And it's knowing the difference between those two, which is the really important one.
So there's a few people trying to get in that can't for some reason. I've just been told. Just let me see if I can organise that.
There's none in the waiting room, so.
Because there's no one in the waiting room.
So there's nothing you can do to organise that.
No.
It may not be for our session. It's just
no, it is. I just got a text.
Oh, okay. I wonder why they can't get in.
Yeah. Oh, you had to use the Zoom web launcher. Okay. Thank you, Sophia. I'll just text that.
And we can move on.
You keep going, Fuzz, but I'll give them the meeting number.
Okay. So I guess one of the key questions is what makes an effective coalition? And there are a number of things that we find that it's important in our experience and the research that we've done, and also the ones we've observed, the coalitions, the healthy ones that we've observed that we're not part of. One is the common agenda, that we're here to be able to, do whatever, stop slavery. We're here as a coalition to work on forced labor. We're here as a coalition against sexual servitude. We're here as a coalition to stop all slavery, or we're here working nationally as a coalition to try and get support from government, from maybe businesses or other areas of society to do that. Good research and knowledge base is really key, because if you're not based in reality, you can't work in reality. And so knowing what your realities are, we've found really, really important to give an integrity to the coalition that you are trying to form. The third thing is, and Carolyn, you ready?
No, you keep going.
Okay. Agreed and shared measurable objectives. So here's what we're here for. We want to cut down on migrant labour abuse, and so our objectives and our measurable outcomes are, if we can get feedback from community groups, from ethnic groups, from migrant groups that say, look, we are noticing a much safer area. We know that people are now able to understand the situation and dynamics they're involved in. We know that they are able to be aware of what should be in a contract. These are measurable outcomes to see that you can assess what's going on. You don't do it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it for the objectives that are there. Developing a culture of generosity and strength focus is key. It's not that everybody should do everything. It's who is best to do what. So, for instance, in our coalition, there are some groups that focus on supply chains, for instance. So they're the ones that we work with strongly to be able to work on supply chains. There are others that work on aftercare. And so they're the ones that we work with, and they take the lead and they give the input and share their intel and also their research into aftercare of people coming out of enslaved situations. That sense of generosity in terms of, you admitting someone up there waiting?
Ah, yes.
So it's really important to have a generosity to be able to work with and to do it. And a part of the generosity we find really important is humility. One of the philosophies that we work by in Be Slavery Free is the belief and the value that we believe there's no end to what one person or one organization can do if they're willing to not take the credit for it. In other words, we don't want to put our name on everything and get people to go, oh, gosh, you're really, really good. We'd much rather people stop slavery. That's what we come together for as a coalition. That's a key objective. That's what we try and work on and doing it. And that's a sense of generosity, of sharing out the understanding and saying, look, it's the team that did this. When we got the Modern Slavery Act through, one of the people who had not joined the coalition, but we were working with, came, gave a great hug and said, look, this is up to you. It's not up to me, and it's not just up to us as Be Slavery Free. This was everybody working together. We worked on doing this, and we were the ones that brought it through together. Those that joined the coalition and those that didn't. There's mutually reinforcing the activity, so that when there might be a campaign, it might be a practice, it might be a training. When that's reinforced by people supporting that, that becomes quite key. Did you want to add to that one?
No, I think I'm just been focusing on getting people in.
That's a generosity.
So welcome to those people who managed to join this, and we're sorry there has been some kind of a technical glitch between Hoover and Zoom, and we don't know what it is, but we're glad that you found us.
So continuous and creative communication. Communication, Karen. We've tried all kinds of different ways to communicate, and I wouldn't say that we have mastered it in any way, shape or form, but we try and get people communicating to each other. But very often what we find is we just have to get on the phone and we have to ring each of our coalition members. And so that's how we communicate internally. But we also have to provide them with creative communication techniques to communicate with their constituents as well, to be the most effective that we can be. So give an example. Let's ground this. So at the moment, we're working on trying to bring in the New South Wales Modern Slavery Act, and that was passed in July 2018. And it went under our system for royal assent, which means that, yes, it was signed off, but it's not been enforced, it's not been enacted. So we've been forming coalitions to be able to do that. So how have we done the communications for that?
So we started off very early on by when this started to be an issue, the bringing about of this act, of pulling together anybody that wanted to come along. We've probably got a list of 200 different community groups and NGOs who are interested in this area, and we said, let's have a conversation around what we think is important to bring into this. So we did that conversation, did a webinar. We were then partnering with Oxfam as the lead organisations. We went away as the lead organisations and put that into a bit of a position paper, which we circulated around.
And a fact sheet.
And a fact sheet. People were then able to comment on it. And then we produced what we thought was important. Now, some of our members had other things that they thought were important as well, and that was absolutely fine. This is what we were going to push for together, and if we could support people on other things as well, then that was great. Now, because we had done that together, and in this case, the backbone organisations were ourselves and Oxfam and another group called War on Slavery, we became the people that the media were interested in talking to, that the politicians were interested in talking to. Then one of the political parties came to us and said, we want to raise awareness on this. So we did a virtual rally because it was the middle of COVID. And so we had a whole range of different actions and activities that we took together. So hold on, I've got a couple of people in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. I just need to admit them all.
Good.
So that was the strategy that we used in that case. So that means that now, as we've had to reactivate that campaign again, we already have that bunch of people who are ready to go on it.
And the accessing a grassroots network is absolutely key. So it's not just between the coalition, but also as the coalition to be able to go out to local groups, individuals, and those who sometimes will join us just as a part of it. And the other one is trying to work out how we find ways forward for doing that. So
great. So this is a bit of a picture of Be Slavery Free and how we operate as a coalition. So we have faith groups, community-based groups, businesses, aid agencies who are part of it. And they become members of Be Slavery Free. So some of the aid agencies and community groups are service providers. When we're working with businesses, we also link them with trade unions. Our key faith groups that we're working with at the moment are Jewish and, next one, Fuzz, Christian, but we would have their organisational members, but we have non-organisational members from other faith groups as well. And we look to constantly be adding who are the groups that are going to be the most effective and most helpful. And in a sense, we have this core group of people, but then an invitation and a generosity to whoever else can be involved. So
there are 4 areas that we focus on. There are other areas that we work with as well, but in each of those, we have a coalition. So chocolate, Carolyn?
Yeah, our chocolate coalition, we work particularly with about 5 other international NGOs on producing the chocolate scorecard. We are by far the smallest. So one of them is a US NGO with 10 million members. And so when we put out the chocolate scorecard this last year, not only were we able to expand it from just looking at issues of social issues such as child labour, but we're also able to look at environmental issues because some of our members had that strength. So that meant that in chocolate, we actually, our impact in and reach just in print media that we were able to track was 215 million. And so we often talk about, we feel like the elephant and the mouse walking across the bridge, and we're the mouse and we look up at the elephant and say, gee, we make this bridge rock, don't we? Because we've been able to share our expertise into a network of people that spread it far further.
But we're also a coalition that's a part of another coalition, Europe-based.
Yes, so we're also part of the Voice Network, which is a network of NGOs and civil society that is essentially a watchdog of what's happening in the industry. It also has members from the global south who are in the countries that are our key where our key work is happening. Now, we would never have the capacity to build a relationship with countries, with partners in those countries, if for no other reason for distance and time zones. But by being in this coalition, we're actually able to help with that.
So that's a coalition that's also part of another coalition. And then also in the fashion and cotton area, the cotton campaign.
Yes, so in cotton, we work with the coalition to end forced labour in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Uyghur cotton. And so we're able to use a lot of their resources, their research. Their spokespeople are readily available. They are far more in touch on the ground. And so because of their work, we get to be in touch on the ground as well. And then amongst our own coalition, we have a number of our members who are interested in fashion. And so we work with them on that. And we bring the knowledge of the international coalition to the local coalition.
And in tea?
Tea, we're part of another network called Thirst. It stands for something about tea. I can't quite remember. But Thirst is a whole range of organisations across Africa and the Indian continent that are working for sustainable and healthy tea where there is not abuse in the supply chain. And so our joint actions with that are connected with that particular campaign. And do you want to do seafood?
In seafood, we're a part of the Thai Seafood group, and that is 38 organisations working together, not just with Thai fishing, but with Taiwan, with China, Vietnam, and right around the Asia Southeast area region, looking at ways that we can work together in connecting with government and with companies and with unions and with other civil society and NGOs in working on that one. So there are times that this jigsaw has these parts on the side here, which are add-ons with particular sectors and areas. Some are secular, some are partners, some is government, activists, etc. As a part of that coalition that happens from time to time. So what are we trying to do in a coalition? It's develop connections and shared concerns to grow capacity to be able to disrupt the modern slavery and create safe conversation spaces for people to work on things together. It's about developing relationships and best ways on how to work together with NGOs, perhaps with politicians or their staff, so that we are able to develop actions and develop strategies. That means that there are 4 quadrants, and it seems you've got to have 4 quadrants for everything these days. So the first quadrant in the coalition and developing a community of the willing is about building relationships. And then in the community of the willing and stopping slavery, it's intentional commitment and capacity building. Then it is developing best practice together to build capacity to stop modern slavery. And then it's a culture change that helps to change the mindset, the expectations, the fallback of this is who we are and this is what we do because we are who we are. And then, of course, it is a continual thing that goes on, building those quadrants, building those practices to be able to form a stronger coalition and develop and grow the strength of that coalition. There are 4 factors to build a coalition towards sustainability.
So part of it is to constantly have fresh information and to work with the coalition for discerning what needs to happen next. Some of these tasks are not short-term tasks. So often when we first of all partner with a new member, I remember one that we started to do a campaign on tea around, and they said, so how long do you think it'll take us to get what we want? 3 months? And I said, well, probably more like 3 years. So because we're working on things that do take a long time, there needs to be a constant refreshment. And I think sometimes people avoid taking the first step because they feel like they don't know enough. One of the things that you actually need to do is to take the first step so that you will know more and constantly rediscern what's happening on. So that's about ongoing consulting with the community as well.
And then it's about experimenting and evaluating. Look, there's no silver bullet. No one knows exactly how to do this. And so much of what we do as NGOs is about experimenting, trying things, learning from them, making mistakes, or as we like to say, having excellent failures that go, okay, that's not the way to do it. But evaluating continuously what has worked and why, what didn't work and why, and be able to try and plan the next steps to build the coalition team to work on that together.
Okay. Do we want to take questions if anyone's got questions?
If anyone's got questions, can you put them into the chat?
Yep.
Because we're meeting. Yep.
Yep. No, nothing coming up. Okay. Here is 3 stages that we would say of building a coalition if you're starting it from scratch. It's the planting stage, the pioneering stage, and the propagating stage.
So in the planning stage, there's this whole thing of working out about being a coalition and the context you're in and having the context actually determining what sort of coalition that's going to be really important. Do you want to do the 3 years?
Yep. So the planning stage or the beginning stage can take up to 3 years of getting to know your context and your people, for the context to get to know the coalition, and for you to figure out how to work together. Don't be afraid of disagreements within your coalition early on. Work through them, because that kind of crisis is often the thing that steps you forward to being ready to take the action and truly be effective.
Starting a coalition is exciting and can be a motivating process, but it's a heck of a lot of hard work. And despite having to do it all, making that first step should feel like a big leap towards achieving important goals. If you don't have important things to come together around, it's probably not worth having a coalition. But it's a time when you need to work out how you make decisions about making those decisions and what ways you're going to work together and adopt those things that can affect how the group will operate for years to come. How you start often affects the first 3, 5, 15 and 20 years. So starting well and learning to evaluate and reflect on that is absolutely key.
So what's needed in the planting stage of a coalition? There are functional things and there are values or relational things. So the functional things include that you have to figure out your communication mechanism, your participation and your leadership approach. For example, will there be 1 or 2 groups that lead? Will it be shared leadership where you swap it around? What will it be? And look at other coalitions and see what they're doing and seeing what works. What are some of the systems? And also take time to reflect and evaluate. If you just keep going forward without reflection and evaluation, you're not going to learn. And what are the resources that you need to develop together that do not exist in the individual parts of your coalition?
One of the most important things is working at your shared values. What's your shared vision about what you're trying to do? To value the importance of justice, the outcomes, and focus on those outcomes, your actions together and how you'll do those actions together, the generosity we talked about before, and also the human rights. These are key values in the area of modern slavery, which we find absolutely crucial, and we're moving very fast now.
So you're in the pioneer stage, what happens is that your leadership style develops. And so what we've learned in our pioneer stage is that we only do well when we do it together. And so the couple of times that because of various pressures we've tried to do something on our own, it actually hasn't worked. So we don't do that anymore. That doesn't mean we don't initiate things. It's about how we initiate it. You get to multiply and oversee actions, and this might take another 3 or 4 years. And again, there will often be a crisis point in your pioneering stage. And part of that crisis point is often from a fear of failure. Things are moving forward and people are going, oh my gosh, are we getting to be successful? We're not used to this. So they become anxious, and sometimes anxiety creates a crisis point.
There are all sorts of dynamics you need to take into account, and we're not going to sort of spend time on that now. Have a look at this afterwards and go through these if you want to, copy them down, or we can send the points to you. But then propagating.
So propagating is about multiplication. It's about exponential growth.
About scaling.
It's about scaling. So what we have now realised is that the resources that we provide for the NGO sector are actually very, very easily replicable to a wider group of smaller community space organisations. and they're also replicable to schools, and they're replicable to business. So we're now moving on the exponential growth stage, which is not about us getting bigger. It's actually about us inviting more people to be part of the impact that we can have.
So the question that is really important, as we were mentioning before, is what can be best done together, as in a coalition, and what can be best done in individual organizations? And our reflection experience, the studying that we've done, the observing we've done of coalitions around the world, is that together you can work on high-level awareness, regional awareness, develop understandings of best practice, campaign and inform, research and information gathering, and international networking. But in organizations, there are things that are really best done in organizations, Carolyn.
So often service delivery is best done in an organisation rather than a coalition, unless there are very defined tasks. Sometimes it can be done in partnership, but when we're doing service delivery, it is more difficult to do that in a coalition that is making joint decisions. There needs to be a dissemination of decision making depending on the context of that you're working in. Local awareness raising is best done in the organisations, although the coalition can provide the materials that can be bespoke. Some issues will be very localised, and although the understandings and wisdom of the coalition can be used, if you've got a reputation in your local area, then you should use that reputation to bring in place what it is that you want to do. And when things become very targeted, working with very community-based local cultures, again, that is best done through an organisation.
Now, it ain't easy, folks. And sometimes we say that working in coalitions is, it's a little bit like this.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
And yep, it's often like herding cats, Carolyn.
Yeah, we often, when people say, what do you do? Depending on what we want the conversation to be, I say, I herd cats. And that's what running a coalition is actually like. So what do you need to be able to do? You need to know how to organise things, but to maintain a very flexible structure. We don't ask people in our coalition to all do the same thing. We provide a framework for action where people can pick and choose what's going to work for them.
Flexibility, yes, is key, and the structure sometimes has got to be flexible to be able to cope with different situations and know how to move to the different situations. Action plans and deadlines with outcomes oriented meetings is key for getting people to feel a part of it, depending on what sort of connection they want. Some people just want to be fed information. Some people just want to network and talk with others. And so communication, and more communication is absolutely key. And then follow up and follow through are the key elements.
Part of what the coalition does is provides a deeper level of expertise and documentation that can be used in the coalition. So there will be people with subject matter expertise. That might be that they're lawyers. It might be that they're public policy experts that can actually provide that expertise that individual organisations don't have. It's important to articulate goals and messages clearly and simply. Then you know if you've achieved what you've set out to achieve.
And the human cost is key. Keeping focus continuously of how is this going to affect a person that's caught in slavery or people who potentially are caught in slavery. A lot of what we do is prevention, because we think prevention is much, much better than correction. It's better to build a fence at the top of the cliff than to just run an ambulance service at the bottom. And Carolyn? We don't want the road.
Yeah. So we're not interested in just building a fence at the top of the cliff. We actually want to change the road so the road doesn't go anywhere near the cliff. And that requires a different kind of level of change and vision.
So we're here to stop people going through the suffering that slavery can do to them, to their families, their communities, and often to their countries. So we use as many forums as possible to promote the message, and we try to be inclusive, diverse, yet speak with one voice when we can and where it is appropriate. And Carolyn?
Also, we need to recognise the international context and that timing does matter. It matters in a couple of different ways. It matters in terms of when you do it, but it also matters in terms of if you're working internationally in a coalition, when are you going to put things on? Time zones mean for us in Australia that they're usually at 3 a.m. if they work for the US and the UK. And so there are lots of different ways that coalitions manage that, but recognising that things are going to be different in different countries. For example, at the moment, the EU is putting in due diligence legislation, and that's quite different to our modern slavery legislation. So we need to be talking in those coalitions so that we're not using the same words but meaning something different.
So there are many dynamics of a coalition that's got to be coordinated, harmonised, diversify, be connected, be inclusive, and cooperate. And I guess the key one is this, Carolyn.
When we trust each other and become interdependent, we can actually lift each other up and we can balance far more things than we thought. So
there's an old African saying that you may have heard: if you want to go fast, go by yourselves. If you want to go far, then go as a coalition. And we find that as being incredibly important. Okay,
we've got some questions. So Sophia has asked the question, how do you create a culture of generosity, especially if you've got organisations that, hold on, it's just moved, who want to be able to report results and take credit for the results? That's a really, really good question, Sophia. And, you know, organisations are driven differently. Our approach is we don't need to take the credit. And so, for example, just recently there was a modern slavery case that was a sentence was handed down today. We had some journalists contact us for a comment. Now we said a couple of weeks ago they contacted us for a comment. We actually said, you know, we think that one of our partners in Melbourne and one of our partners who's a legal expert would be better at answering this than us. So in a sense, people then looked at that and we actually got the comment, you mean you gave up media profile in order to get a better story? And we went, of course we did. They were in the better position to tell the story than we were, and they were going to do that better. The fact that they get profile is good for the movement. And so that's how we would operate. So I guess, Sophia, it's not always easy. In the end, you just have a little smile to yourself when somebody else takes credit for what you've done, and you just kind of go, they must have needed that, and we didn't. So it's about being able to have that kind of maturity that says, you know, this is about the movement. This is about ending slavery. It's not about whether be slavery free or anybody else gets a good profile. So I hope that helps. It's not easy. So Jenny Stanger's asked about resources for impact evaluation. And Jenny, that's an incredibly good question that we probably don't have time to answer. But there's some good resources that are coming out around social impact measurement that talk about how that can be done. It's very difficult for coalitions in and of themselves to get funding. If for no other reason than everybody else in the coalition is trying to get funding. And so as everybody else tries to get funding, then you're actually in competition with your members. And our government is very good at putting us all in competition with each other, and I dislike it in the extreme. I'm going to put this one to you, Fuzz, from Shantanu. Hi, Shantanu. It's nice to see you online.
Always.
How do you resolve conflict in coalitions?
Shantanu, how many weeks have you got? I think that a key part is being able to develop the sort of relationships when conflicts happen. It often happens because there's not been a lot of ramp up, or there's not been a lot of structure around to be able to get the communication. Most of the ones that we found, not all, but most have been around communication and people not understanding what is going on. And so a part of it is continually casting and being reminded what we're here for, how we're doing it, the importance of working together when it is important to work together. And the other one, which I think is absolutely key, is that you build into your coalition the ones who have particular skills of getting alongside of people and be able to get them to talk out what their frustrations are, what their needs are, what their anger points are, and what they're struggling with. There are some things, and one of my very, very good friends who sadly died last year taught me was when you have a struggle coming up, one of the things you need to work out is one of these two things, and often it is these two things, is this. Is this a functional question, or is this a personal or a pastoral question? And you deal with functional things and system things systematically and functionally, and you deal things which are personal in a way which actually works on helping that person to think through, or caring for them, or knowing what they are like. Jimmy Carter was one of the best conflict resolution people I've read and come across. And I would highly recommend his books. His Center for Peace has put out an amazing amount of resources. Now, remember that he brokered the peace between Egypt and Israel. And the way he did that was by getting the conflicted people in the room saying, what are you really looking for? The peace in Northern Ireland came about when they were able to get the head of both parties together in it. And the question the negotiator was able to get them to look at is, what do you want for your grandchildren? In other words, what future are you building here? So there have been some really good examples of conflict resolution, but we've not got a chance to go into that. That's a whole course to go into the depth that is there, but working out what sort of conflict it is, working out the ways that you can work with that, trying to build the relationship and the trust, and then trying to find ways of focusing on what you are here for, to be able to work out, is this going to help us to achieve what we're here for, or is there something which is going to put a block on that, would be the key points that I think would be starting points that you go to with that. Great question, Shannon. And I imagine something you have experienced and continue to experience.
Okay, what are the key essentials to make each organisation genuinely responsible to achieve the common goal? Oh, what a good question. In the end, you can't. One of the things in coalitions is that people often, the coalition goals, well, sometimes the coalition goals are actually secondary to the organisational goals. So this happens actually a lot in modern slavery. So we're linked, as Fuzz said before, with the Coalition to End Forced Labour in Uyghur areas of China. Now, you know, that issue jumped onto the scene fairly dramatically. It's not in the strategic plan of any NGO really to work on that, because it's so new. And so most of us who are working on it are doing it, as they've all said to me, we're doing this in our spare time, because it's not in our organisation's strategic plan. It's not that it's opposed to our organisation's strategic plan. It's just we're lean organisations, even though some of them are quite large. We're lean organisations, and our capacity to drop one issue, which we think is really important, to quickly pick up another one is absolutely limited. You kind of need to realise that when you're in a coalition, that your member organisations will change, and you need to, in terms of what they can contribute, and you need to know them well enough that you're not asking them to do something which circumstances have changed, which means they can no longer do it. So it's not like running your own organisation. It's like picking up a lot of organisations and understanding their dynamics enough to be able to bring what they want to bring into the partnership.
One of the things we've been working on now for quite a few years, and we discovered it in the first World Cocoa Conference, where for the first time, all the people in the chocolate industry came together in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, and they for the first time sat in the same room together, about 1,000 people. There are people there from the producing countries, the consuming countries, the chocolate companies, a few farmers, hardly any at that stage, the processors. And so what they realized when it came to slavery and it came to child labor in the chocolate industry, there was a shared responsibility. Not one sector could do it. So when we looked at this and we tried to understand what people were saying and listen to what was happening, we went, this is actually brilliant, and this is how a coalition can work. So we've been trying to work on this shared responsibility model, that there are 5 sectors when it comes to slavery, and each sector has particular roles, but then they have relationships with other sectors to be able to do that. And so we thought we'd work this all out. It's about roles and helping each other. That's great. So we showed it to Arti Kapoor, as we often do, bounce things off Arti. She is just amazing to be able to do that with. And she said, well, Fuzz, of course, there's actually one thing that's missing here. And I said, what's that? She said, it's the accountability. And as soon as she said it, it just hit me. Of course, we've been working very idealistically. And so I said, so where does the accountability come? And she said, well, you're going to have to work that out, because there's actually very few models for it. And so this accountability is a really, really important one in coalitions, in working in partnerships across sectors, about how we find that. Now, listening to Professor Tom last night, United Nations has a key role in this. That's why it was set up. Can they do this? Not always effectively. Can they do it in a coalition? Because the United Nations is a coalition. And so I think that this accountability is a really good question. And we're no experts in coalitions because we don't believe there are any experts anyway. There are only lead learners. And that's what we try and be, of continually learning these aspects about how do you do it. But to pick up Artie's one this morning, and I think that the things that she was mentioning of is this a systemic thing that we need to build into accountability? Is this a biographical or sometimes even geographical? And is this a contextual thing? And I think those three things come into play when it comes to working out how you do accountability, because it will be different in different coalitions for different reasons.
Jenny made a good comment. Can you build accountability into the membership? To a certain extent, you can. So, for example, in our membership, we say that we have about 5 member forums a year, and we say we want you to come to 2. So you can build things like that in. You can ask certain actions of your members, like we would ask our members to join up to the Ethical Storytelling Pledge. And so when we see things that might not resonate with that, that leads us to be able to have a conversation because we've raised it. But most of the coalitions that I've seen that work well are not as tight as some people would think coalitions are. So, yeah. And we're at time, Fuzz. We
are. Well, hopefully that's helpful. Are there any other key questions there?
I don't think so.
Great.
Now this will be available online. Some people are saying, why aren't the presentations available online immediately? Well, it's because they actually have to be processed and put into a format which is not the Zoom format that you can actually read on your computer. And that can take several hours because we've got some very big presentations that are here. So they will be up as soon as we can get them up. And we will
generally they're up within 24 hours.
Generally they're up within 24 hours.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're trying to do. But they're not going to be up immediately. Our apologies for that. It's just not humanly possible. And we will put this presentation, I'm not sure where things go on the Hoover app. There are so many things in the Hoover app, we're still finding them. So.
And then they do new things. So listen, I hope that's been helpful, and hopefully it gives you things to talk about within your organizations, between your organizations, and even with other people at ARIT this year in the chat rooms and in the networking spaces and places there. So please take it, use it as you will, toss out what's not helpful, take on what is helpful, and then shape your own, which is appropriate to your context and those that you might wish to work with more effectively. So thank you so much. All the best. And hey, let's work together for a better world. Thanks very much.